want to add value as quickly as you possibly can. Try to avoid things like saying, like, do you want to sell your building? Do you want to buy a building? I think throwing out a stat in the market that we really spend a lot of our time tracking investors, right? Because we want, first of all, them to educate us on the market, right? It's a two-way.
Before we begin the podcast, I have a super simple ask for you. If you could subscribe to the channel, that would help us reach more business owners every single day. Thank you. Let's begin.
All right, Brian, you're a commercial real estate agent in New York. Last month you ran what, 30 million?
Yeah, so we had a banner month last month. Not every month is 30 million, but in September it was 30 million. A lot of things came together at the right time. Some of those deals took a year plus to come together, but like everything in life, when it rains it pours. So happy enough that it all hit.
Amen. And that's what, 4 deals?
That was over 4 deals, correct?
Like, yeah. How many deals do you usually get?
So my partner Mitchell and I, we started a team 12 months ago. So it was October 2023. We joined Ripco Real Estate, and we set out an aim that we were going to close. It was 13 deals in 2024. So far we're on 8. So we're, coming down the stretch of 2024, 3 months left, and we still have a few deals to get done. But even at 8, we're in a good spot. I feel like we're going in the right direction.
Yeah, I suppose commercial real estate is relatively sparse, right? Like there's not a whole lot out there. So like with that, not having a whole lot of, I guess, leads, if you will, how do you find them? Like what are you doing?
It's really tough. It's really competitive, right? Because the barrier to entry in commercial real estate is low, relatively speaking. You don't need a college degree, right? You'd like that. And it's a 75-hour course. So it's, anybody who wants to spend some, probably $80 can get you the course. You sit the state exam and you're in business. So you can basically sell the Empire State Building or you can sell a house in upstate New York. There's really nothing to stop you. Yeah. So it's very unregulated, and that brings opportunities, but also has drawbacks, right? Everybody can get into real estate. In New York, we say there's more people with real estate license than driver licenses. So it's a very active industry, but there's no distinction either between residential or commercial. So that's why I say about the Empire State Building, it's obviously, in theory, you could go do that, but in reality, that's not really possible. So
yeah, you gotta have your niche, right? What are you known for? What are you good at? I know, because you're commercial. So do you have a niche within commercial?
Yeah, so we do commercial, and within that bucket, we define ourselves as middle market. So typically middle market can mean, for some folks it means 1 to 200. For us in New York City, middle market is typically your mom and pop owned real estate. So that could be anywhere from 1 million to 50 million, I think is probably the most active. And even within that 1 to 50 in our space that my team and I focus on, it's typically 1 to 20 million.
Okay.
And that's a very active space. Usually includes say 6 units to maybe even 50 units on multifamily. And then for retail, it could be anything from, 5,000 square feet all the way up to 100,000 square feet.
Okay. Yeah. So on that more specifically, how do you find the leads? Like, are you going to networking groups? Are you advertising? Are you doing search engine optimization? What specifically is getting you the leads?
The main blocking and tackling in commercial real estate is cold calling. So what we try to do is rip phone calls in the morning time. We do that pretty much with the end game of closing for a meeting. It's very hard to pitch somebody over the phone. It's very hard to close a deal over the phone. But what you can do is get them to meet you for a coffee, or maybe get you to go for lunch, or whatever it is that you're into. Usually once they hear that you're in real estate, that you're familiar with their building, that you know what's going on in the market, most folks, especially when you make it easy for them, will meet you for 5 minutes, 10 minutes to discuss what's going on with their own real estate. And we try to keep it super casual like that. And we're not even expecting anything big to come from that first meeting, but it's more of, now they're in the ecosystem, right? Now you're calling them every couple of months. Maybe you're sending them reports and you're deepening that relationship. So I would say number one is the cold calling. We have got a lot more into email marketing, especially for our deals. We use HubSpot for that. So HubSpot's great because you can do a personalized email to a lot of different folks. and then you can send it on a loop. So if somebody requests the information, and then there's an auto response goes out and it gets them the information. And not that we want to take the personal touch out of it, but it just helps us get to the people who are really interested quicker. And I think that's a really good value add for the owners as well, because they know that their property is being shown to a really wide pool of buyers, and that we have a system then for following up with them to make sure nobody falls through the cracks.
Real estate agents, are you struggling to capture leads? If you're struggling to capture leads through your website, we can help. We've created a step-by-step guide on how to use our lead capture engine. It's the system we've used on all of our real estate websites to capture sellers, including Cade Covey, who earned an extra $80,000 in just 3 months by working with us. Are you ready to set up your lead capture engine? Visit dmrmedia.org/#gift to learn more about how we can get warm leads like a pro.
That's really, really smart, because you're cold calling to get the people that you're selling for, and then you're email marketing all of your potential investors, if you will.
Correct. Yeah.
I know one thing that's worked really well for me, since I'm in the B2B space and I target a lot of realtors, is sending a Loom video first. So breaking down, like, you can get part of that 5 minutes and you can make it go farther. If I say, hey, I saw X on your building, right? And this is a little bit interesting. Here's a Loom video breaking it down. And then cold calling like the day after, because they're lukewarm. All you have to start the cold call with is, I sent you an email yesterday. Instantly, like, all sales objections dropped. I don't know what you're doing to kind of circumvent that, because I feel, especially if you get cold called by someone and it's like, hey, do you want to talk about your property? They're probably going to put up a barrier. What are you doing to circumvent that?
Yeah, that's really challenging. And I feel like a lot of the time we have the same conversation over and over. And to your point, it's probably not a good use of our time to dial that number and have the same conversation with somebody who maybe, oh, what time did you send the email at? When did you send it to me? I'm busy today. So the Loom video, which is, I believe, is when your face is on the video, right? And you're just talking through a deck. That's something that we are looking at, because I just think it's more efficient use of everybody's time involved. So somebody mightn't have time the minute I call them, right? They might be doing 10 other things at the same time, and then I call them and they have to stop and they're not focused. So if you send a video over that's walking them through the offering, they can be at home in the comfort of their own home and on their own time, able to walk through it, press pause, rewind, fast forward, and skip whatever bits aren't relevant, rather than listening to me for 2 or 3 minutes, talk them through a deal that they may or may not have any interest in.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. And the other advantage with Loom is it tells you when they open it.
Oh,
so when
nice.
they click the video, you can call them because you know they have time.
Right. So that's a really warm call. Yeah, for sure.
I'd call it even lukewarm, because it's not like they're really ready to buy yet, but it's enough where it's like, hey, if I call you, I recognize you. I've heard your voice before, and I know a little bit, plus I have free time. So it's the perfect time to call them. For me, my entire list of people that I'm cold calling and cold messaging is 40 people. And I've booked, I want to say, half of those for meetings, just because I'm doing this, because they're warm already. So that would be something to really look into, or at least try out. And I think it's $15 a month.
What about the age profile of people using it? Do you find that, say, baby boomers have difficulty accessing it, or they can't like get on, or is there any issues like that you came across?
Super simple,
Really?
because so you can copy and paste it as a GIF. So all they have to do is click it and it starts.
So you click it, you don't need a subscription on the,
Nothing.
nice, yeah.
Yeah, it's super, super good.
I feel like there's those types of tools so much more time efficient.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
How many cold calls are you doing a day? What are you?
So when you start off in real estate, I started with Marcus and Milla Chap. I did their training program in 2017. So you start off calling a lot. I mean, there used to be competitions of how many folks you can call in a week, and some guys were 400 or 500 dials a week. That talk time was probably not very high, because you're new in the business and you're just dialing anyone and everyone. You're usually given a few lists, but then as you progress in the business, year 1, year 2, year 3, you see the number of dials come down, but the talk time go up, and that just means you're having deeper conversations, more focused, and you're less spray and pray than you are in year 1.
Yeah.
So today I'm really not making that many cold calls. A lot of the calls we're making are warm at this point, because I focus on an area. I know the owners within that focus area. So I'm calling the same folks for over 5 years now. So even if they're hearing my name on a voicemail, even if they're just saying hi and I say it's Brian Whelan and they hang up, they still know it's me. Yeah, hopefully I'm not too annoying about it, but I like to hit people, even if I haven't spoken to them before. I even say, hey, it's Brian Whelan. Do you know who I am? I've sent you over that information. I was just following up on it. I like to ask as well, is now a bad time to speak? Because I've found that a lot of people actually want to say no quickly to somebody. So by saying is now a bad time, they say no. Here we are, we're ready to talk for a minute. So that's actually worked in getting someone's attention for, even if it's just 30 seconds. Right now I think in terms of calls, it's more about quality than quantity.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing that I see in marketing as well, is everyone wants that quantity value. And it's like, yeah, that's cool. Like you can have 100,000 people looking at you, but if like 0.2% of those people buy, like you're not going for quality. You could be doing way less and getting the same amount. Whereas like I'm sure it's way more time efficient now compared to when you started. But you also need the quality to get going. So I'm curious on that with the cold calls. You mentioned getting that no right away. Walk me through your script. What are you saying to people? How are you going about it?
I feel like it can vary, but I do feel like you have to get to the point quickly, right? People don't really have time for chit chat, especially when it's a call they weren't expecting. So I do think you want to add value as quickly as you possibly can. Try to avoid things like saying like, do you want to sell your building? Do you want to buy a building? I think throwing out a stat in the market that directly impacts their own building is one thing that I've saw is helpful. So for example, if you own a building, right, and it's a 10-unit apartment building and it's on 123 Main Street, you could say something like, hey, Mr. Adam Smith, I see you own a building on 123 Main Street. The building at 125 Main Street sold last week. It sold for 500 a foot. Do you have any questions on that, or how do you think it impacts the value of your building? Because that kind of gets them thinking like, oh, well, who bought that, or why did it sell at that price? And the real question you're hoping you can hear as well, what does that mean mine is worth? Because then all of a sudden you've got a nice in to talking about their building. You say, well, that's a great question. We'd be happy to put together that valuation for you. And then you try close for your meeting. And once you have that valuation in with an owner, that's something then, as commercial brokers, we say you're always like sowing seeds. So those valuations are seeds that mightn't even grow or come to fruition this year, but they will in year 2, year 3, year 4. And that's why folks who are further along in the business just have a much better crop to call upon.
Yeah, it's getting them to come to you.
Yeah.
Almost. Yeah.
100%.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. So you're just doing cold calling, essentially, is primarily how you get all your leads. Are you doing any advertising or?
Yeah, I mean, we try different things, obviously networking groups, try to sponsor different events, but I really think our time is best spent with that direct communication, whether it's a phone call or really I think what's best is the in-person meeting, because as you can imagine, like I said at the outset, that there's just so many brokers in this business. So really calling, like if I owned a building, I assume it would really be eye-opening just to see how many times these guys get called every day. So I really do think that if you can get that in person and you can make it a real relationship, and then all of a sudden you move over away from cold calling. Right now you're texting, you're emailing, you're maybe doing like meeting for a drink. Because once you're texting, like if someone is a sports fan, right? So we have the Jets in town and all of a sudden that person likes the Jets, you can shoot them a quick text and be like, can you believe these Jets? And it's just that it's outside of the office then, and it's a much better approach at building an actual relationship that's not transactional. Obviously, that's hard to do at scale, but you don't need to do it with 1,000 people or even 100 people. I really think if you have 50 good people in your Rolodex as a broker that are active, are in the business, and that you're providing value for, hopefully, I think that can really make a meaningful career for a lot of folks.
Yeah, and I know you mentioned it's hard to do at scale, but you don't need to do it at scale, right?
No, we don't need to do it at scale.
Like you only need like 10 quality leads a year, realistically.
Yeah, if we could, listen, if you close all 10 of them, then yeah, that's your year. But obviously to close 10, you probably have to strike out on maybe 50, so it comes back to that wider marketing funnel that everybody talks about. If you're going to call 500 people, maybe 50 will actually be able to do business with you.
Yeah, exactly. I know Laura, what's her name? Laura Croft. I don't know, the one that Darren was talking to a few weeks ago.
Right.
Yeah. She was talking about how she does everything herself. And she has, 160,000 people on LinkedIn. She responds to every comment and she responds to all of that herself. She writes all of the videos, everything. That's not scalable. Like, I don't know how she's managing it, but that is insane. And for you, that'd be almost perfect because you create that personal connection, like you said, with the Jets.
Yeah, exactly. How do you do that with 160,000 people or whatever it is? Yeah. So yeah, I think having a small bucket sometimes that you can go deeper with, I have found is actually more profitable. And it's also just more enjoyable because at a certain point, it's not even about business, right? Hopefully you get on with the person and share a lot of things in common. And it just so happens that you happen to be in real estate together and maybe I can do something good for them. Maybe we can make money together. But that's all bonus territory.
Yeah, I know. I've got a bunch of clients that just send me memes on at least a weekly basis.
Yeah.
Like, it's great to have those guys where it's more of a personal connection because then you can also make it better for them. Because if they're doing something, like let's say something happens in the family and you know about that, it's not like, hey, I can't do this right now. You're like, how can I make this work for you and work with you for it? Whereas if it's that transactional relationship, they're not going to say that, right? They're not going to they're going to beat around the bush. They're not going to tell you. And so you can't really work with them as well. So it creates a better quality.
100%.
What's your favorite? So if you're cold calling, what's your favorite way to get leads?
So if I'm cold calling somebody and like what way do I drill down on cold calls?
No, how do you find the people to cold call?
Oh, okay. Gotcha. Yeah. So that comes back to having a focus area, right? So if you're going to be a product specialist, that might mean that you focus on multifamily or maybe you focus on retail or development. Then other folks might focus on a specific geography. So that means that you take a zip code or two zip codes. Or in New York City here, we have boroughs. So you might be a Bronx specialist, for example, like my partner Mitchell. And that just means that every week you're looking at that Bronx territory or that multifamily territory. And you know, because you've studied it so hard, how many buildings are in that market, how many owners are in that market. So you come up with a prospecting plan, right, that maps out your month or your quarter or even your year. And you come up with a way of systematically going through every one of those owners. So if, for example, you have 1,000 owners, right, in that focus area, you're going to come up with a way, well, how do I hit every owner in that market at least once a month or once a quarter? And then how do I replicate it to follow up on people that I didn't hit so I hit them the next time? And if I don't hit any folks in that market, then how do I hit them from another means? Like maybe I follow up with an email, maybe I get a postcard, maybe I write them a letter. But as long as you're coming up with some way of hitting everyone in that market, then I think you're going to do a good job at tracking everyone in it. So that's typically what we do. We focus on an area, so we're more so geographically focused. We know within Upper Manhattan and the Bronx what the market is, and we've devised a way of making sure that we're keeping in touch with everyone in there.
I suppose there's only a fixed amount that you can really go for, and it's probably pretty small. Do you ever expand on that? Ever grow your area?
Yeah, I mean, we're always looking to spread our wings. I just feel like the stage we're at in our career, it's more about dominating our core area, because if we spread ourselves too thin, I just feel like, you just become a master of nothing and you're just running around chasing the bouncing ball and not really getting a handle on anything. So I think for us, we're going to see in the future more opportunities come up from being experts, from being the guy within our focus area. And I think further opportunities for growth or maybe for side businesses might come up out of that. But I think what's important to us is dominating our niche, and we got another few years to go to make that happen.
Yeah, you have to be really, really good at one thing. That seems to be how everyone's making their money. They didn't do really, really what they didn't make all of their money in doing 20 different things. They invested it there probably, but they got their money doing one specific thing. Like we mentioned, Darren with podcasts, right? It's just podcasts. That's all he does. And so that's what he's good at. And he's making all of his money in that. Sure, he probably has investments, but it's one thing. And so that's your one thing.
front end product, back end product, right? There's what people see you do or what people see you sell. So for me, that's selling buildings. Then there's back end products that maybe we could grow into. That might be, you know, investing in buildings. It might be providing training or courses to other brokers, further education on the market. You know, there's probably a lot of different things you could pivot into, and especially now with the world we live in, it's just about coming up, I think, with what's your platform. How do people reach you? How do they engage with you? And then on the back end, hopefully you can figure out other ways to monetize.
Absolutely. Yeah. I wanted to also poke on the MLS thing.
Yeah.
So I know we were talking a little bit before the podcast, and you mentioned that you don't really have an MLS. So for those who don't know, that's the multi-listing service. It's essentially just how real estate agents publicize that they have a building or a house or whatever. So how do you function without an MLS?
Yeah, I think that's the Wild West nature of real estate in New York City. We don't have an MLS. There's no organized platform for us to that we're mandated to participate in. But what we do is we use platforms like our own websites, or there's third-party listing sources like LoopNet, CoStar, Corexy. So there are places where you can go and put your listings, and it's probably a good idea to do that just to make sure that you're hitting as many avenues as possible. But yeah, we're not mandated to do anything. I think traditionally this business that we're in here in New York City has been very much relationship driven. So the history of brokers in New York City is probably that there's been, you know, a few rainmakers, right? And they have all of the data, they have all of the relationships. And I think maybe in the 80s and 90s, that was probably the way it went. And you would have had a few folks doing a lot of business. It's obviously got more competitive since then, but I do think a lot of it still remains true, that it's still very much a relationship business. And a lot of the time, if you want to get access to the best deals, that means you need access to the best brokers. And there's no other way of doing that other than getting on the phone yourself and making contact and getting involved with as many folks as you can, whether it's brokers, attorneys, developers, buyers, sellers. You know, just like brokers, I really think active buyers now need to be hitting a lot of different channels to make sure that their deal flow is something that's consistent.
Yeah, absolutely. I know for you, investors are probably really big too.
Yeah. Investors are huge. I mean, we spend a lot of our time tracking investors, right? Because we want, first of all, them to educate us on the market, right? It's a two-way street. So if we exchange information, they give us information. I think we're all piecing together the pieces of the puzzle of where the market is and where it's going. And to keep your finger on the pulse of the market, I really think you need to be having those conversations with buyers every day, because you need to learn how they look at a deal, what's important to them, what they're seeing coming down the pipeline. I really think that helps you then when you're pitching for a deal or a listing, because you can definitively say to an owner, this is or is not what buyers are looking for today, and why.
I like that. On so advertising to buyers, so investors, I know one of the things that with the MLS you can do is you can take every new listing in the MLS and you can send it to them as like an update email. So let's say a new listing comes, email, new listing, right? And you can kind of filter for what they need, yada, yada, yada. Do you do anything like that? Are you able to?
I mean, it's not really done on scale. I'm sure some firms do it. I mean, for our particular website at Ripco Real Estate, which is the brokerage firm that I'm with, you can go onto the website, you can filter by any search parameters that you're looking for and find a couple of deals. But you're only seeing our firm's deals, right? So you really, in that scenario, I'm sure you want to see not just Ripco's multifamily deals or retail deals, but you want to see every broker's deals, right? So I think that's why you could argue the market in New York City is probably inefficient, right? It's as good as the brokers are, because it's on the brokers really to peddle all of these deals and make sure that, you know, they're getting out to market and finding buyers. But that's kind of the game we have here.
Well, if you don't have the MLS, one thing that you could do is, have you ever thought about advertising for other real estate? Because I'm sure you get a commission for representing someone to buy. So if someone's coming from you and you get someone else's deal, you could advertise someone else's listing and still make enough. And all you really have to do is say, hey, like there's a building here that you could have.
Yeah. And listen, it a lot of folks do that. It's called working the buy side. So there's the sell side and the buy side. And a lot of folks would maybe have deeper relationships with buyers, and they act more as an acquisitions associate for the buyer, right? So the buyer might tell them, listen, I'm looking for this type of deal and this type of location, please go find it. And then the broker, through the broker's relationships, might be able to go and find that deal. And yes, they would then make half the commission usually for representing the buyer. You bring it to the seller's deals. The only thing about that is typically you've no control over the process then, right? Because the seller has the listing agreement, so they have a mandate to go sell the property. The buyer typically has nothing, only an assignment from maybe a buyer who may or may not buy the deal. So what you'll find is a lot of brokers like to have that control, because you need to control inventory usually to control your income. If you're not controlling inventory, then in theory, the way you describe it, yes, it sounds like it could happen, and a lot of the time it does, but working the buy side is sometimes there's a lot of work goes into it with no reward a lot of the time, because it's low probability brokerage. At least when you have the listing and you represent the seller, whether that buyer or another buyer takes the building, you're getting paid either way, so you're protecting yourself. But you don't have that protection when you're working the buy side.
I suppose because then you can also short people almost. So a little bit of background on this. The MLS, or at least the one by me, just changed. And so I don't know if this is national, but how it works is it used to be you do even commission for both sides, and it's all in one agreement. But now what's happening is the buyers, so the buyer's agent, working the buy side, if you will, has to negotiate their commission. So oftentimes what's happening is they're getting shorted. And I'm sure that happens if you're doing that in New York here as well. Because think about it, this seller's probably doing more work. And so what they want to do is they want to be like, oh, listen, like, I'll give you a quarter of the commission I'm getting, right? Like, I guarantee you that's how it's working. I'm just curious, how do you ever work? You said you don't really work the buy side, but have you ever?
Yeah, more so at the start. I mean, when I started this business, I got into residential real estate. I was selling apartments and co-ops and leasing units in the city because I literally had no idea what I was doing, and I just wanted to break into the scene. So in that scenario, I didn't have any owners. I didn't have any of my own listings. So I would use my own personal network to find out who's looking to buy an apartment in the city. And in that scenario, you leverage your relationships, personal relationships, maybe friends that are looking to do something like buy an apartment, and you go find it for them, and that's just almost like paying your dues. I feel like if you don't join a big firm, which I didn't until year 1 or year 2, so I could properly learn the business, you might get by on just pure grit and just leveraging your own network. In that scenario, yeah, you bring your buyer to somebody else's listing, and you hope that it all works out. But it's certainly, I believe, a harder way of doing it. It's nice to have, if you think of your income as a broker, you think of it as a portfolio, right? I'd probably guess that somewhere between 60 to 80% of a top producing broker's income is going to come from exclusive assignments. And then you'll always have those slams that you try and make, right? That's the 20 or 30%. That might be slam a buyer into someone else's deal, or maybe something just fell on your lap, or you got a nice referral to somebody else. So you kind of recognize as the years, 1 year after the next, that, oh, that's where the bulk of my income is coming, so I'm going to spend most of my time on that. And then what's not making me money in that area, I'm just going to refer out. So if somebody came to me and was looking for a specific buying opportunity, unless it was like a long-term client or someone that we knew really well, I'd probably, I'd show them our listings, and then I would refer them off to, if none of those work, I refer them off to somebody who is set up to handle a buying opportunity, because we like to just stay focused on our sellers' listings. I believe they've put their faith in us to get the job done, so I don't think it's fair for me to just take my attention away from their assignments that they've hired us to do and just work on low probability brokerage. But everybody's different. That's the nice thing about this business. You can go and do it any way you choose.
Yeah, there's 1,000 different ways to skin a cat, if you will.
100%. Yeah,
right?
yeah.
I'm curious, specifically on the seller side. So you're selling a property, let's put it this way. How do you start that off? What are you doing? Where are you listing it? What are you doing? Just walk me through that process so that you can find a buyer.
Yeah, so we get hired on a listing, and then we put together the marketing materials. So we typically take maybe like a week to get everything done. You have to go photo the property. You want to do as much diligence on the property yourself as you can. So we like to create a deal room, usually use Dropbox, where you put together 5 or 6 folders that we know every buyer is going to look for, right? So they're going to look for floor plans, they're going to look for property tax information, they're going to look for a rent roll if it's occupied, they're going to look for environmental studies, zoning studies, right? And it can get fairly sophisticated. So we always try to act as if, what would we want if we were buying this property? And we go and get that information, because even though it's a bit of a pain to get on the front end, especially as an owner, a lot of owners say, oh yeah, but Brian, listen, they're going to do their own diligence anyway. But my point is, that just opens us up to a can of worms. So it's better that we know the information first, because then we can control the narrative. So I always think, if you can spend some money on the front end on making sure that you have all of the diligence items that any regular buyer will look for, then it just puts you on the front foot, right? Because now all of a sudden when they say, oh yeah, but there was this oil tank leak, or there's an asbestos issue, or 1,000 other items that could come up, you're now out in front of you, you're like, yes, and we factored that in the price, and here's the cost to remediate or fix it. So it just gives that sense of confidence that we know what the true value of this building is, because we've really done all the work on the front end. And it allows us then to make sure that a buyer, once they agree to a price, that there's no surprises for the buyer either. Because don't forget, we want to do repeat business with not only the seller, but with the buyer as well. So we want to make sure that the deal that we're representing is a deal that is a good deal, a clean deal, and there's no hidden skeletons to be uncovered.
Real estate agents, are you tired of chasing leads? If you're struggling to find quality sellers or feel like marketing takes up too much time, DMR Media can help. We specialize in getting real estate agents high quality leads, ready to buy leads through SEO and pay per lead approach. That means basically no upfront cost and zero risk. You pay when we deliver results. Imagine a steady flow of clients finding you on Google while you focus on closing deals. We've done it for agents like Cade Covey, who earned an extra $80,000 in just 3 months with our system. Take back your time and get results. Visit dmrmedia.org to learn more about how we can make your marketing work for you.
Do you post that on the website then?
Yeah, so it's not really on the website, but it's probably too much information to put out there, and it's not really fair on the owner to disclose everything about their property. So what we try to do is give regular access to as many people as possible. So we might put together a 1 or 2 page teaser that says, for more information, click on this link, and then we have them sign a non-disclosure agreement. And that just allows the owner then to at least know who is looking at their property, who's looking under the hood, and what their name is, what their role in the deal is, and just allows us to control that spread of information as well.
I love that. It's almost like a makeshift lead magnet, if you will.
Yeah,
almost.
exactly. Yeah, you get them in, and then if they want to go deeper, they have to give you something. And don't forget, then you have emails, you have phone numbers, and you have new people going into your database. So it's really a good system, I think, for everybody involved.
I mean, it's all about the contact information, isn't it?
100%. Yeah.
So once you have them, I assume you throw them in your HubSpot then, and then you send them all the emails for other listings as well?
Exactly. So now you have a little bit of their criteria, and it could be, say, for example, they didn't get that deal for whatever reason. The next similar deal that comes out, we know that you like this deal, so we want to give you first look at this. And again, goes back to the relationship building. Now you're just going deeper with that person. It's not just a cold call or hoping somebody will answer or have a conversation with you. Now you have real time data for them, and you've got a new deal, and hopefully they'll be like, oh, that's good. Brian brought me that. He remembered that I was interested in that deal, and now I'm getting a chance at this one. So again, it just that whole effect, if you rinse and repeat, can be very effective.
It just spirals out, right?
Yeah.
That's how you do it. What are some externalities that you find in terms of the marketing with the non-disclosure? Because I'm sure there's something that you wouldn't expect there, because that doesn't seem, at least from my perspective, that isn't common near me. So what are kind of the unintended consequences of that?
I think it slows down the spread of the marketing, right? So it's almost a roadblock to marketing, because as you know, right, one or two extra steps you might be just like, maybe I don't want to give my email, or maybe I don't really care about this deal that much. I was just glancing over it. So it can definitely, listen, as a broker, you want as many people as possible to have access to the information, because that's going to get more activity, right, which is going to help you do your job. So as you put up roadblocks, and in this case, I think it's probably a necessary roadblock, right? You have to protect the owner's information.
Yeah.
But it definitely slows down activity. But what you do get, if somebody went to the trouble of doing the NDA or filling out that extra piece of information, now you've got a really hot lead, right? Because they spent the time, they were familiar with the deal, and they were willing to give their own information in exchange for getting more intel on the deal. So that's a good way of funneling it out.
It's good friction versus bad friction, right? Fundamentally. So, for example, I have one that I'm talking to right now, a real estate agent in Milwaukee, and his entire thing is he does free inspections. He'll give that away for free. And I said, why don't we make this a lead magnet? Because everyone wants a free inspection. So if you just create like a pop-up, that's good friction because you have to do more, but it gets you their email address and you're doing nothing additional.
Yes.
Right. So it's good friction versus bad friction. You really have to find that balance. I'm curious with, you're with Ripco. So you just have the website through them, or how does that work underneath them?
Yeah. So at Ripco, I think there's probably close to 150 brokers like me who are working under the Ripco brand. We've got 7 offices in the Northeast, so it goes from Florida up to Connecticut. So we are in the Manhattan office, and the way that it works is, I mean, yes, we use the website. Within that, then there's probably a few different avenues we can go depending on what type of deal it is. Typically, we use third-party platforms, like I mentioned, Crexy or LoopNet, because that just, again, helps. Not everybody might know Ripco, but LoopNet or Crexy have obviously a wide database, and they probably get a lot more traffic than any brokerage's, one brokerage's website. So in terms of like tools to use for online platforms, those websites would probably be the main ones to hit.
What are you doing like underneath? Like, what do you get from them? So I know, for example, Next Home Priority, you get KV Core, you get a website, you get all that stuff, right? What do you get for working with Ripco?
Well, you have to hang your license somewhere, right? So if you're a broker, it's really an agent, right? A licensed real estate salesperson. By law, you have to have your license with a brokerage. So is that your question? Like, what do I get in exchange for
I'm saying more like, so I know you have to be under a brokerage.
Yeah.
But a lot of brokerages offer things underneath that. What specifically drew you to Ripco?
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, that's a good question. So we were at another firm for about 5 years. Like I said, my partner Mitchell and I, we felt that last year a couple of opportunities came up, and we were just at that stage in our career where it made sense to go out and see what was in the marketplace and what the appetite was like for taking on a brokerage team like ours. So we met with a lot of folks, and Ripco were just at that, for us personally, Ripco were just at that point where we felt like they would give us the best runway. So it was an experienced company that had been around for 35 years, right? So it had proven that they know how to run a brokerage, but they also were not in the investment sales space. They were just doing retail leasing. So we saw an opportunity to come in alongside another investment sales team. They just started getting into investment sales about 2 years prior to us coming on, and there was another investment sales team in a separate office in Queens, but there was nobody in the Manhattan office. So when we came in, we said, this is an amazing opportunity. Just there's runway in front of us. They have a real name and a real presence built in the market, and now we'll be bringing that investment sales angle. So it was just the perfect opportunity, we felt, to take something that was already built and kick on and make it even better.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Are you doing any investments yourself?
We're not doing any investments ourselves. So I'm 7 years into the business, and I really feel like the first 5 years was just about survival. Usually they say 1 or 2 years to survive, and then usually kick on. But we had the added, the added curveball of COVID thrown in 2020, and then that obviously ran its course. So we're just getting now that we're not treading water anymore, and we feel like, you know, we've proven the concept, we've proven that we can work as a team, and we've proven that we can get deals done. So I think for the next year or two, it's more about building out that team, and anything we earn is going to be reinvested into growing the team. But I would love to certainly in the next, you know, maybe 5 years, start investing in deals as an LP, where you could see an opportunity, see a deal, or we have a lot of good relationships with developers and people who are, you know, doing some pretty cool stuff. So we often hear of capital calls coming and people looking for investments into their properties. So we'd happily do that as long as it didn't cause a conflict in our own sales business. You know, we'd have to disclose everything, but certainly investing in real estate, I think, is why most folks get into brokerage in the first place, because it can be a great conduit into learning the business and seeing how these deals are put together.
It's also really nice for the write-offs.
Yes, big deductible. Yeah,
I absolutely love the fact that if you're in real estate and like you have a real estate license, you can write that off and everything. Plus, if you're your own realtor, commission, right?
Yes.
So there's a ton of different additional added benefits of doing it for you. And it's not like you can almost pair it with a job, because you're finding a deal. You're like, hey, if you're down, I'm looking to buy a property. Can I look at this one first before we put it on the market?
Yes.
And there's so many good bonuses there.
Yeah.
I wanted to poke you on the podcast as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So talk to me about that.
Yeah, so we were looking for a different angle, right? I know it seems like everybody is getting a podcast these days, but it's still in for commercial real estate anyway. There's definitely a couple out there, but we felt like it was just a really great medium to reach folks in a different way. And similar to what we were saying about the cold calls and the emails, now we can add that as another layer of just letting people engage with us in their own way. And maybe that's when they're going on a 2 or 3 hour drive, or whether it might be hanging out in their house or working in the garage. It's just another way that they can listen and hear our thoughts on the market, and hopefully we provide value to folks and give our thoughts on what's going on. And I think it's a smart avenue to go down, because I just think that the long form conversation and hearing how people think about things is becoming more and more popular. It's super useful as well for learning, for, you know, I'm constantly listening to podcasts, right? Whether it's, you know, business or politics or whatever it is, just to go deeper on certain subjects. And it's a much more, interesting way of learning, rather than just through a deck or a course online. You know, you're hearing a lot of the time from folks that you know or from that you respect on how they think about different things. And I love the podcast.
It's also very personable.
Yeah.
Like, unlike a course online, they're talking to a wide variety of people, where especially like one-to-one podcasts like this, you're talking to another person. So it feels like you're almost in the room with them, if you will. And that, I love that. So many podcasts. I know Darren keeps harping about how don't be Chris Williamson. And it's the thing that he does so well. And same with like Joe Rogan and those guys, is it's so personal.
Yeah.
Right, where like you just don't have that in the real estate because it's so educational.
Yeah.
But I think you guys are definitely trying to blend that, and you can see that.
Yeah, we're trying to bring it a little bit more casual, and hopefully not, you know, we're trying to make it not salesy. So it definitely is more about, here's an interesting person in real estate that we brought onto the podcast. Here's the way they're seeing the world. And, you know, hopefully it's 45 minutes of well-spent time that you can just be like, that was you know, cool to hear. And also for the person doing it, I feel like in 20, 30, 40 years, it'll be nice for them to look back on that and say, oh, that's what I was like in 2024. And, you know, you can give it to your kids or let people see, you know, what you were doing back then.
Yeah. Even like for me, going back 3 months or so on the podcast, I'm like, I'm an idiot.
Like, you learn so much from doing them, don't you? It's like everyone is, yeah.
And the people you meet, it's absolutely great. Like, I met some of the best guys through the podcast.
Is that why you got into podcasting, or what started you out in that journey?
Yeah, absolutely. It wasn't even money for me. It was mostly just the fact that I could meet really cool people. Like, I'm young enough right now where I just take all the money I make and I spend it right back in the business because I know it's going to yield a bigger return later, or at least I pray it does.
Yeah, I'm sure it will. Yeah.
So it's more about meeting people,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like, I was upfront, like, I wanted to meet you because I'm looking at real estate, doing a lot more marketing for real estate agents.
Yeah.
And so it's just building those connections and then joining courses. Like, we keep bringing up Darren, but I keep bringing up Darren. But yeah.
Darren Lee from Voix.
Yeah, yeah. Just with him, he's a great guy. He's crazy.
Yeah. No, but it's a big help because obviously podcasting is a whole thing in and of itself, right? So Darren Lee has been a huge help to both of us, I think, in like how to actually create a podcast and how to get it to market and distribute it, and hopefully find out a way of making it sustainable. And I think that's the biggest hurdle for a lot of folks. You get in, you try a podcast, it's time consuming, right? And it's fun to do, but it's you're trying to do it right, and it takes a lot of thought. So making it sustainable, I think, is the key, and that's why it's good to have Darren and his team.
Exactly. And the other thing with podcasts that I think a lot of people don't realize is if you can sell with it, then you can outsource everything. So it's more efficient and you get a better quality product. Like, no one wants to listen to a podcast where someone's selling constantly, but selling even a little bit allows you to do more and have a better quality product throughout the entire thing. Like, if I wasn't selling or at least having a couple ad breaks within the podcast, I couldn't hire an editor.
Right.
Like,
right.
I couldn't.
Right.
And so you have to have those built in.
Yeah. Otherwise you would just, be doing it for fun, and then it's fun to do, but you got to make money, right? You got to find a way to pay for the editor or pay for the studio and all of this cool stuff you've provided here today, which I appreciate.
Absolutely. Yeah, dude, it can't be a hobby, right? If you want to make money, just flat out. It can't be a hobby if you want to make money. And so it's so hard to find that. Where is it working?
I know. Yeah, little by little, we'll get there.
Yeah. How often are you recording?
So we do a couple of episodes a month. Right now it works out to be about 2 episodes every month. So I feel like we usually do them on the same day. It's called the Broker Brunch. So we try to have, a more chilled out atmosphere. Usually we have a few drinks, or we might have lunch beforehand, because we find that just, gets everybody into the right frame of mind. And we try not to do it on weekdays either, right? So Monday to Friday, you're just in a different mindset. I find for myself personally, it's hard to really reflect on where you are, because your phone's ringing, you're involved with deals, you're running around. But if you do it on a Saturday or even a Friday evening, it gives you a little bit more of a headspace, I think, that lends itself better to long form podcasts and drilling down on topics that not necessarily just business, but also just thinking about why we do what we do, which a lot of the time I find is the most interesting stuff.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. It's like the weekends seem to be more that laid back as well, so you get the personal, right?
Yeah.
I'm curious, are you getting leads from it?
So it's more, I would say, that the folks who already know us are really engaging. So we have, say, our database, right? And we try to make the content in the podcasts applicable to what's going on in their world. So if we get it out to our whole entire network of people, we record a podcast, we send it out, we find then that a lot of the content is repeated back to us from these clients throughout the month. So in that scenario, I'll give you a quick example. I was talking to a large building owner, right, who I wasn't really even sure knew who I was, but he called me, and he was like, "Listen, I heard one of your episodes, and it was about a big multifamily buyer, right?" And he was giving his thoughts on different deals at the moment, and he was like, "Well, why is that guy buying today? Like, what's he seeing out there?" And I was able to say, well, listen, if you actually listened to the full episode, he actually breaks down exactly what he's seeing in the market. And he goes, I listened to the whole thing. I know, yeah, no, it's great. I just wanted to hear you say it as well. So it's kind of cool to think that a guy is out there that you really are hoping to do business with one day, and he's listening to the pod, and that's like, could be the guts of an hour of you unfiltered talking about a subject matter that you're an expert in and that you want them to hear you talk about. And then we recorded it once, and maybe it hit that same type of person, 50 or 100 different times. And I don't know how we could ever, do that. Would take like 100 lunch meetings, right, to get that same type of information out there. So I find that it's just a super helpful way of creating engagement. It's hard, I think, to measure the direct benefit, right? But I do think it's like everything in life. If you do it consistently, you come up with a process for it, you're going to build it. Like what we said with the cold calls and the valuations, planting those seeds, I think it's going to have a mushroom effect, and you're just going to grow a whole network out of this thing, and hopefully have a body of work there that people can listen back through, and different subjects that you gave advice on, and it just helps create that subject matter expert aura about what you're trying to do.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, podcasts, I found that I'm getting some leads from it, but like you said, it's more about the people who are watching and they care. Like they're buying into you, which is really, really cool.
Yeah, exactly.
So you have a partner on your podcast, so there's two of you.
Yep.
Are they really buying into like you specifically? Are they buying into him specifically? Or is it more like they see you as kind of a duo?
They see us as a duo, I think. We're very much like a team. We're tight. We're building something from scratch, which kind of bonds you to somebody, right? You feel like you're in the trenches with them. So he's from London. I'm from Ireland. And if you're American, that's kind of the same neck of the woods. But back where we're from, it's very different, right? Irish and English, it's probably like a Packers fan and a Bears fan, right? It's like, you're sworn rivals. But thankfully, we created a good friendship because we were in this together in New York City. And we do, I would say, have an outsider mentality. It's because we feel like we're coming in from the outside. We had no connections coming here. We just both shared a passion for real estate, passion for New York City, and we got a big goal. So I think that shared ambition is really what brings us together. But yeah, I do think from a business standpoint, we're becoming a bit of a duo, and long may it last.
Yeah, duos are the best. Like having a solid business partner.
I totally agree.
I've also heard horror stories.
Yeah, well, it can go either way, right? I think you have to choose wisely, right? If you have a certain skill set that you're good at, you need to look for a partner that has the exact inverse of what you have, because there's no point in everybody being good at one thing and then certain parts of the business falling by the wayside. So I think we play to each other's strengths, and that takes time. I mean, we're still figuring it out to a big extent, but you do, like in any relationship with whether it's a girlfriend or marriage or a business partner, whatever it is, it takes time to build that trust, right? There's 3 months, 6 months, you could maybe break up. There's a few things that maybe you don't agree on, but all of a sudden, if you can get through that disagreement and you find a new common ground, and I think for a business partner, it's probably that shared goal, right? It always starts with that. And if you share that, then you usually can work through the nitty gritty. And I even find now when you're into it, we've got through a lot of situations, and I feel like we've a much stronger trust and bond that you can only build by going into this together and putting in the time.
Absolutely. It's almost like finding a second spouse.
Yeah. That's what it's like. It's, it's a whole different thing, and requires effort, requires time. You have to give a piece of yourself to it, but I do think ultimately it'll be all worth it.
Yeah, I heard so there was a real estate agent in Madison, and her bio is, I found my second spouse. It's like a love affair. And that's her bio on the website. And I'm like, that definitely gets clicks.
Yeah. I think choose wisely is what I would say when it comes to partners.
Yeah. It's not even about, you have to choose wisely, but it's not only just avoiding the wrong person, it's finding the right person. So I'll highlight this. I have a guy that I essentially work with, and we're not business partners, but we have two LLCs under the same branding effectively, because his strengths are my downfalls. And so we just refer a lot of business and decided we can just have our overhead. But the problem is on the business side, on marketing, we may have complementary things that we work together well on. But on the business development side, we don't. So for example, we're both really, really good at operations. Mm-hmm. But neither of us are really good at the execution on building those operations. And so we find that dichotomy, and so we're butting heads on that. But it's you have to not just find the person who you can't work with, but you have to find the person who you can mesh with really, really well on everything, not just one thing.
That's a really good point. Yeah, you have to see the world the same way. And like you said, maybe one person is good with operations, maybe another person is good at execution. In our world, in real estate, it's usually there's two ways that I see it. It's origination and execution, right? Because one person or hopefully both people can create opportunities, find deals, but then somebody needs to execute, right? Somebody needs to go and actually find the buyers for those deals. Because if you're really good at one thing, or the team is really good at in one area, it's no good without that complementary skill set. So you need a yin to the yang, and that's what I think teams give you, right? They give you the opportunity to do things that there's no way you could do on your own. Otherwise, why would you do it, right? I mean, we all like to build things together and be successful together, but ultimately, what's going to be most effective? And I just think having multiple mindsets and many different ideas at the table is a good thing. It's also a lot more fun.
True.
Yeah.
Playing with ideas is the best.
Yeah,
it's the best way to go.
Yeah, it gets out of your own head, and I think it's a good way to do it.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I wanted to touch on one last thing here with you. Do you have any agents? Anyone working under you?
Yeah, so we have Yoni Arbach. He joined us in January. So yeah, he was our second hire. So we hired for a marketing and admin role because we felt we needed that back office execution, like we were saying. And then we quickly hired a junior broker, and that's Yoni. And super proud of him. He's just a great guy. And he closed his first deal within 6 months, which is lightning speed in our business. That's a quick turnaround time to find a relationship, get them to trust you, find a building you can sell for them, and find a buyer for it. But he did it all, so I think he's got a big future. Our hope is to find 2 or 3 more Yonis that we can mold and grow into, be big producers within our team. And then I think once we get to being a team of 6 or 7, right now that feels like the right number for us, and I think we'll be able to do a lot of damage with 6 brokers in New York City.
I'm sure you don't need that many, right? Like staying lean is so important.
I agree.
Because everyone wants to add the fluff of like, I have like 20 employees, and you're like, no, you have like 5. You spread the work between 20.
Right. Yeah.
Like there's a difference.
Yeah. Bigger isn't always better. Right.
Yep.
It's you can be lean and mean, and I think you can be super effective. Right. In today especially, I mean, you really don't want to have any fat. Right. You want everybody producing. You want everybody turning the screw in the machine, because that's what's going to make you a successful team, I think, in the long run.
Absolutely. Like right now, I used to have a copywriter. So there was 3 of us. There was a video editor, there was a copywriter, and then there was me. Well, now it's just me and the video editor, and we're running at the same speed. We're doing just as good. And so we didn't need the extra fluff. Like I didn't need to pay a copywriter. So it's finding that balance, which is really hard.
And I feel like for you, very much in startup mode and early on in your career, it's about, I think you should be doing everything, right? Because you need to obviously you're going to want to scale as you grow, but I do think it's important that you understand every task that happens within the process, because otherwise you're not going to be able to hire for it. You're not going to be able to understand what type of team you need, and also it just helps you manage better. I think when you've done it, like I've made the calls, I've done the meetings, I've sold the deals, so I know what it takes when I'm telling somebody else what needs to happen. I'm not saying I always know what's right, but I have a roadmap. And I always say, if you want to get on this team, we're not saying that we know what the finish line is or how exactly to get there, but we have a map, and if you want to follow us and come along for the ride, we think it's a pretty good roadmap.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
Hopefully we get you from A to B.
I'm curious what your thoughts on this are. So what I'm doing in my business is we essentially do 2 things. We do search engine optimization and we do email marketing. And of course we build the website with that, right? That's just a given. But I've gotten really, really good at search engine optimization, but I'm also getting really, really good at email marketing. And the problem is I'm taking too much time. So I'm picking whichever one I'm good at and I think I can teach really well, and outsourcing that or trying to outsource that. So what are your thoughts on learning something, then outsourcing it, learning it, outsourcing it, and just repeating the cycle? Is that kind of...
Yeah, I think if it's anything client facing, I think you're going to want to keep for yourself, right? Because that's the real high return activity, and when you're a client as well, you don't want to have the feeling that you're being passed off to somebody else or to somebody that's just hired to check a box. So I really think I try to keep any client activities, but anything like you said, like the automating a listing or a simple auto reply to an email or just physically sending over the offering, that doesn't necessarily need to be me. And I do think that kind of activity can be outsourced. You know, anything that's repetitive. A manager, I used to work at JP Morgan, and she told me, you know, anything that you repeat should be handed off quickly, because there's no real benefit to you in doing the same thing 5-10 times a day. You know, you kind of have to be able to leverage other people, hand things off, and ultimately that's going to help you be more effective.
Yeah, I mean, evidently it's all leverage at the end
Right.
of the day, and so it's what can you outsource and what can you not.
Right.
Here's my biggest struggle right now is I do Loom videos. So let's say, for example, I do a website and then I do a blog post with it. So I'm doing a blog post and I'm doing a email market. So, okay, we'll go through my standard package. It's typically just a blog post and then an email for my opener. And so with each blog post, with each email that we send out, I break it down in a Loom video. The problem is, how do you scale that? Right? Because it's personal. And if I'm trying to keep myself client facing, I have to do it. And so it's really, really hard to figure out, can I have someone else write it and then I break it down? Or what can I do here? Because that's not super scalable. And I'd say that's one of the biggest things in my offering that's different from other people, is because other marketing agencies will just say at the end of the month, this is what we got you. Whereas this, I'm walking you through the process, and they feel like they're involved, but they're not doing a ton of work. They're just watching a 3-minute video. And so it's not a lot of work, but they're involved, right? And so that's really the big.
And you can do that at scale, right? You can do that. You can really mass produce that, right? Because you're given the same, you're a hand holding basically, right? Because you're walking through the process, but you're able to do it an infinite amount of times throughout the day. So I think that's really smart.
Yeah. It's interesting. The problem is functionally, how do you work it within the business? And that's kind of what I'm working out right now. So that's all I have for you today. Where would you like to send people?
Yeah, so I think if you want to interact with us on social media, we're on LinkedIn. Just search Brian Whelam, you'll find me. If you want to see our deals, you can go over to the Ripco Real Estate website. And if there's ever any real estate that we can help out with, even if it's just answering questions on what's going on in New York, always more than happy to chat.
Awesome. There we are.
Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you.
Cheers.